During World War II, the Japanese military strongly discouraged surrender, viewing it as dishonorable and against the Bushido Code, the samurai code of honor. The expectation was to fight to the death, prioritizing glory and loyalty to the emperor. To surrender was the biggest act of disgrace. So when 55,000 American troops overwhelmed Japanese forces in the recapture of Guam during the summer of 1944, for many Japanese soldiers, surrendering was not an option. As American forces established a beachhead and worked their way inland, it forced some Japanese soldiers into Guam's dense jungle mountains. One of those soldiers was 29-year-old Sergeant Shoichi Yokoi. In order to hide, Yokoi dug a cave in the ground near a waterfall, covering the entrance with bamboo. This cave would end up being Sergeant Yokoi's home for the next 28 years. I'm a big fan of the reality show Alone, where people are dropped in the wilderness and the person who survives the longest, usually a few months, wins $500,000. Sergeant Yokoi would have been a great contestant for that show if it took place in the jungle. Though he wasn't exactly alone at the beginning. There were two other Japanese soldiers that hid in the same area, Talofofo Falls. As Sergeant Yokoi and the other soldiers would occasionally spend time together, but the two other soldiers eventually passed away in the Guam jungle, leaving only Yokoi. Eventually, he figured out that the war was over. Leaflets were even dropped into the jungles from the air to inform the Japanese soldiers still hiding that the war was over and you could surrender without being harmed. But Yokoi still refused to surrender, considering it embarrassing and worse than death. Sergeant Yokoi was on a mission to stay hidden and survive at all cost. He mainly lived in a hole that he dug under a bamboo grove. He chose that site because it was well hidden and because the ground is more solid under a grove of bamboos. He concealed the opening to the cave so well that it was almost impossible to see even if you were standing right next to it. The entire cave was dug with a trowel that he made from an old cannon shell. He carried the excavated soil, handful by handful, spreading it around nearby grassy areas so that no one would notice. It took a month of digging before he could finally move in. The opening of the cave was about 2 square feet, and a ladder led 8 feet down to the inside. The inside of the cave was only about 3 feet tall, which meant Yokoi had to constantly squat. He continually expanded and improved the interior space, including a ventilation hole and a toilet hole so well designed that it would flow off naturally to the river below. There's nothing like having indoor plumbing. He was able to craft many things out in the jungle. He loved making pottery and also made a coconut shell lantern which burned oils. Before the war, Yokoi was a tailor, and his tailoring skills allowed him to create clothing from natural materials like tree bark with a weaving loom he made himself. He repaired his clothes using dried toad skins. On each of his shirts, he made outside pockets for carrying things. He even made a belt with a handmade buckle. The ability to make clothing enabled him to protect himself from the tropical heat and mosquitoes while hiding in the jungle. To stay hidden, Yokoi would mostly come out of his cave at night to hunt and to scavenger for food. He described the acquiring of food as his single greatest hardship. His diet included wild nuts, mangoes, papaya, shrimp, snails, frogs, and rats. He was able to refurbish some items into cooking supplies. On one occasion, he was able to get a wild pig, but didn't cook the meat long enough, and he became very ill, suffering from severe stomach pains for a month. On January 24th, 1972, 2 men were hunting along the Talofofo River when they heard a sound in the tall reeds. They thought it was an animal at first, but came across an old and wild-looking Japanese man carrying a shrimp trap. As they approached, Yokoi was still not ready to surrender, trying to grab one of the man's rifles. They subdued him and brought him back to their home about an hour's walk away. They summoned the police, and the bizarre story of Sergeant Yokoi became known. Doctors that examined him said that he was surprisingly in fairly decent shape, both physically and mentally, given the circumstances he lived in for the past 28 years. In February of 1972, he returned to Tokyo to a crowd of over 5,000 people applauding his return. Stepping foot on his homeland for the first time in almost 30 years, Yokoi said, "It's with much embarrassment that I return." The quote became a popular saying in Japan, encapsulating his dedication, humility, and loyalty to the emperor. After a media tour, Yokoi married and settled down in a rural area in Japan, struggling to adjust to life in the modern world. While in the Guam jungle, he was declared dead by Japanese officials. When he returned to his home village, he went and visited his own gravestone. Yokoi's cave was eventually destroyed in a typhoon. However, you can visit the location of the cave in a now popular tourist attraction in Talifofo Falls Resort Park. Shoichi Yokoi became an advocate of simple living and would receive the equivalent of $300 in back pay from the Japanese government, way less than the winners of the Alone Show receive these days. Sergeant Shoichi Yokoi died in 1997 of a heart attack. He was 82 years old. Thanks for watching. As always, I appreciate it. Please subscribe for more historical videos. Take care.